to the Sugar and Spikes podcast, a show for everyone trying to navigate business and life without losing their minds. I'm Dez, a coach and consultant who is entirely overeducated, habitually overdressed, and obnoxiously honest.
And I'm Tammy. I'm a psychologist. Was I supposed to say more?
You know what? Enough said. We talk about mindset, mental health, and making it all work in the big, bad business world.
One quick note. We may be mental health professionals, but we're not your mental health professionals.
So, enjoy the show! Welcome to another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast, Season 2!
Yay! Season 2, Episode 2.
Season 2, Episode 2. One thing, to just kind of kick it off is last week we mentioned that we were going to have some regular contributors and all of that good stuff. And I was able to chat with Noelle and connect with her. And after kind of talking about what we talked about last week with, when are you ready to kind of get to your next level, when you're ready to grow, she had some really awesome thoughts and advice for folks that are, maybe ready for their next spot in their job, looking for the next role, maybe looking to make some sort of professional move.
Ooh, fabulous.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and pass it over to her and hear what she has to say.
Take it away.
Hey, Sugar and Spikes listeners, this is Noelle from my interview buddy here with some career tips for your week. So are you waking up every day just feeling complete dread about going into the office? You have that feeling in the pit of your stomach, like I don't want to go in. It's especially bad on Mondays, but every day you're feeling like I don't want to be at work. When that happens, it's important for us to establish, that we've outgrown what we're doing. But it's really important to identify if we're looking to move to another job, inside of the company, or if it's the company that's the problem, or if it's both. So before we start applying to new jobs, we really want to identify what it is that we need going into this next chapter. That way we don't waste any time applying to jobs that aren't the best fit for us. So here's a few things to establish is if your problem is actually your company, your role, or both. So number one, real straightforward here, are you working for a toxic company? So is that work environment difficult for you to work in? If so, regardless of you needing a new role or not, it is time for you to roll. Life is way too short for you to be working anywhere where you're feeling taken advantage of, not appreciated, or you're being just completely miserable. There's no point in it. So it's definitely time to make a move. And now all you have to establish is if you want to stay in the same type of role that you're doing now, or if you're looking to transition roles completely. Two, so when you think about your ultimate career goals, the top of your list, are you on the right career path to get there? So when you look at your ultimate dream, are you on the path to get there? If you're not, the answer may be in finding a new position that is more in line with your dream job. It may not be, one step away from your dream job. It may take you a few promotions to get there, but it may be time for you to pivot to get onto that career path. So the further you are from achieving that dream job, the less satisfied that you're going to be in your current position. So you'll continue to apply to jobs that you don't like so much if you're not on that right career path, and you'll just waste your time. So just start to take a look at, making that pivot into a new position. Okay, 3, do you feel like you are aligned with the company's mission? So when you tell people what you do for work, do you get excited or do you get bored? If you feel passionless about what your company does, but you generally like your day-to-day, you may need to start looking for a similar position, but at a different organization. So I think to consider here, if you're not sure if you need to be changing your roles, if you like the company that you're working for currently and you're starting to get interested about what some of the different projects that other departments are working on, it may be time for you to switch positions. So what I would suggest that you do is you check in with the manager and see if it would be okay for you to sit in on one of that department's meetings to get a feel for what they're working on, to see if it's aligned with what you want. You don't have to say that that you're looking to get a new job or that you're looking to switch or anything dramatic when you talk to your boss, you just need to tell them that you're looking to learn more about what the company is doing and you would just like to sit in on a meeting. And just spending the time with the other departments will really help you see what their day-to-day is like, outside of just being at the water cooler or talking to a coworker that works in that department. So that's something to consider. So those are 4 things that you should think about before making the pivot into applying to new jobs. You really need to establish if it is the company that's an issue or if it's your role. So really dig down deep on that before you start applying, because you are ready to grow. I mean, you want to make sure that you're growing in the right way and that you're not wasting any more time working someplace doing something that doesn't bring you passion.
Okay.
Okay.
So all those things were so good.
So helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree.
So many good pieces. And Tammy and I were talking afterwards, and one thing that we wanted to talk about was, you know, getting to the next step or next level, next whatever it
Mhm.
is cool, and it's something that I think generally we want to be striving for.
Mhm.
But then we were talking about, Noelle brought up the feeling unfulfilled in your role,
Yeah,
and we started talking about, well, maybe it's not necessarily the role, like it totally could be the role,
it could be.
but what if it's something else? Like how do you know
Like something
if
deeper.
yeah, how do you know if it's a symptom versus a cause, I guess?
Yeah, well, I think a really good question to ask yourself is, if you're feeling unfulfilled at work, where do you feel fulfilled in your life?
Mhm.
Like, oh, maybe you aren't feeling fulfilled at work, but you feel amazing when you're working on a side project or
Mhm.
you're with friends or I hate to use the word hobby because I feel like that means I'm like whittling, but do you
Mhm.
have an amazing hobby or something that you're really passionate about that you do
Yeah.
that's really fulfilling? Or maybe it's family,
Mhm.
but trying to think and ask yourself questions. I'm not feeling fulfilled in this role. I'm not
Mhm.
feeling fulfilled at work. Where do I feel fulfilled? And if the answer is nowhere, or you really can't identify anywhere,
Mhm.
then I think that might be a symptom of something deeper and
Mhm.
maybe not. Although I think a job can contribute to that quite a lot, but maybe
Mhm.
it's not just your job and we need to look at something more.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, I would say, more true in the entrepreneur world, but even for folks that work kind of a more traditional job, there's this whole societal pressure or expectation that your job should be this thing that like makes your heart sing, and it should be like your biggest passion and give you all sorts of life and everything. And for a lot of people that's true, like that's a really valid goal to have. But I think that there are also folks that feel unnecessary pressure to find something that makes their heart sing when really it may just be a means to an end, and not in
Mhm.
like the negative, day in, day out, like slog. But I think that having a job, like a job, is completely valid if you find fulfillment in so many other areas.
Yeah, or maybe that is what allows you to dedicate to where you do feel really fulfilled,
Mhm.
right? I think that's a really good point is that if you don't define yourself by your job,
Mhm.
totally fine. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I think you bring up a good point too is there's not every day you go to work where it's like sunshine and rainbows and you're like skipping to work and the birds are
Mhm.
singing and it's not always like that. Like jobs are hard. I know where I work is really hard and
Mhm.
challenging sometimes. But where do how do you feel in the long run,
Mhm.
you know, versus maybe more short-term things,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and even so, say you're super lucky and you find a job that makes your heart sing and just fulfills all of the good feels in your heart. But I mean, to your point, work is still work.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like once you found this dream job that you're not susceptible to burnout or frustrations. And that puts this whole other unnecessary pressure on a job that can't live up to unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
Like, how often have, like, we started new jobs, started new projects, started something, been like, "This is gonna be the end all be all, this is gonna be perfect, this is gonna be amazing, fabulous, blah, blah, blah," and then something happens, things don't go according to plan. Maybe you've ended up doing the same type of thing for 6 months. Something happens to where reality kind of hits.
And you're like, "Oh, maybe this wasn't what I thought," kind of a
Mhm.
thing, or it doesn't fulfill me in the ways that I expected.
Mhm.
I think that's why balance is so important. And balance is such this catchy word that like, "Oh, you have to have balance." Well, it by balance I mean if this is the one thing,
Mhm.
maybe you need more of a diversity of
Yeah.
things, right?
Mhm.
So, like all the eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Mhm.
That can lead to really big burnout, fall, like whatever you want to call it. So,
Mhm.
maybe having more of a diversity of things and they don't all have to be 50-50. Maybe you
Mhm.
devote 75 and 25 or 75 and 10-10-5 or
Yeah.
whatever you choose to do, but having more than just one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, financial planners talk about diversification in terms of investments and stuff like that, but how often do we really talk about diversification in terms of time? Like, we talk about it in terms of balance, like, oh, maybe things should be 50-50, things like that, which we've done episodes about why that is stupid.
Boo 50-50.
Um, but still, I think so often we want to have this idea, and I get it, like we really like structure, our brains are designed to look for structure and to fit things into plans and to know what's coming up. So often we want to even take like 5 things that we're interested in, put it into, okay, well, this will be my 10%, this will be my 30%, x, so on and so forth, without leaving room for things to shift,
Mhm.
because that feels comfortable. But then when things do shift, then there's this like angst, uncomfortableness, things like that, where, well, it should look this way and it doesn't. And now I feel bad about that, when really, maybe you don't need to feel bad. It's just this like cycle and
Mhm.
rotation. And I don't know. I think it really kind of goes into this whole idea of taking things day by day and then looking for trends.
Yeah. I was just thinking that. I'm like, "And looking for trend." Then you're like, "And looking for trends." So, yeah,
Yeah.
right? So you have to take a short and a long-term
Mhm.
view. And, things change over time. Are they
Mhm.
changing in ways you don't like? If
Mhm.
they're changing in ways you don't like, how can you move it back towards a way that you do like
Mhm.
with the thing in mind that like change is hard on us,
Mhm.
and sometimes we need some time to balance that out and see if we do like it in the long run.
Mhm.
But if you're noticing, like, I've given time for these changes to settle, and
Mhm.
like, I'm just not digging this just isn't my jam anymore, like, I don't like it,
Mhm.
how can you move it in a direction that you're more comfortable, that it's more enjoyable for you? And
Mhm.
maybe that goes back to what Noelle was talking about,
Mhm.
right? Is it your job? Is it the company? Is it that you're
Mhm.
not quite on your career path where you want to be? And I think
Mhm.
that's a really good way to tie that back in there, is
Mhm.
that's when you have to start asking yourself those
Yeah.
questions. Yeah.
Like, one really bad day at work, one really bad month as an entrepreneur doesn't necessarily mean, okay, it's time for something different. It's when those things start to kind of become the majority rather than.
Yeah. Like
Mhm.
she says, you wake up and like Monday's the worst, but every day's like, no, like
Yeah.
I don't, this isn't, I can't deal with this.
Mhm.
Then yeah, it's time to look for a change. And it's true in life too. If you just
Mhm.
wake up dreading your day, whatever your
Mhm.
day may look like, whether not like, even if you set work aside, if you wake up
Mhm.
on the weekend and you're not working and you're just like, ugh, no,
Yeah.
like what changes can you make
Mhm.
to like enjoy your life a little bit
Yeah.
more? And little changes can make big differences. And so
Mhm.
you're right, it doesn't mean like throwing in the towel or like blowing everything up.
Mhm.
Sometimes it does, but more often than not, it's about little changes,
Mhm.
adjustments that we can make to even move things in the right direction
Mhm.
can have like a big impact on how we feel.
Yeah. And I think even if you're not waking up feeling like, "Oh my god, like what's going on and, just frustrated with stuff. I think also waking up and just feeling neutral and like, okay, it's another day, like very Dilbert-esque,
Mm-hmm.
is also a warning sign, something to kind of think about and be aware of because it may be indicative that like you may be like starting down a not so positive path, or B, it could just be, well, now there's space for something to create excitement.
Yeah.
Like if you're living in this land of neutrals, then there's space for like an accent. Like if you think
Yeah.
about it in terms of
A
clothes
pop
and
of color.
stuff, like or in terms of interior design, any of those things where if everything is very neutral and beige and basic, then that is the perfect time to add something new.
Mm-hmm. Because it means that you're dealing
Mhm.
well with like stressor. Like to me, if you're feeling fairly neutral, to me that's like I kind of got this.
Mhm.
I can manage all these stressors, and yeah, it's not super great, but there's nothing really horrible. So to me, that is the perfect time to say, how can I move this more towards? How can I
Mhm.
add something that excites me?
Yeah.
So that goes back to the idea of like diversification,
Mhm.
right? Like when we diversify, different things engage different parts of our brain,
Mhm.
different things engage different parts of our soul, and like the things we
Mhm.
love and the things we're interested in. And we like that, those
Mhm.
novel new things,
Yeah.
right? Fire different chemicals in our brain.
Mhm.
So if you can keep yourself engaged that way
Yeah.
when you're feeling kind of in that beigey place,
Mhm.
perfect time.
Yeah. And I think also when we do talk about diversification and bringing in these new elements, um, I'm sure there are folks listening that are like, well, how do I decide? And it's really easy to say, well, what's that thing that you've always wanted to do that you haven't
Oh,
done? Which I'm giving everybody more credit than most people do. I'm going to say, if there's something you've thought about doing, chances are you've probably done it by now or you've taken a stab at it. Um, I feel like we've all toyed around with like that one
the
daydream,
thing.
the thing, whatever the thing is. So maybe it's something that kind of seems like the not the least interesting thing, but the thing that like brings up the most amount of fear or like anxiety or oh, I'd never do that.
Oh, yeah.
Like I think I take this perspective when I work with like coaches, when things and opportunities come up in my life where my gut reaction is immediate, "Oh, hell no."
Hmm.
And my thoughts around it are if something is so visceral, then what is it about it?
Yeah.
If there's an emotional reaction that is so strong like that, then A, that tells me I'm not thinking clearly, like I'm not looking at it from a cognitive like
Yeah,
center
you're more
point.
in that emotional
Yeah,
brain.
so that's not the best time to give an answer
Yeah.
or to respond to something.
Hmm.
And then really play around with, well, what is it that maybe makes me scared? What it is it that I'm pushing back on? Oh, is that something that I kind of want to deal with and, grow from?
And maybe you decide that now isn't the
Mhm.
time. Like you can lean into that discomfort,
Mhm.
but maybe it's not the right time.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, and you can also add something small and tiny that
Mhm.
it's just like, oh, like I don't know, just try something new.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves. Like, how do I decide what new thing? I don't know. Just try
Try
it.
something.
Like, I think I know that I do this, and I'm sure other people do too. Is I get the idea. Well, what if I do it and I don't like it? I get this idea in my mind, and I know it's not reality, but sometimes I
Mhm.
get the idea in my mind that if I make this decision, I'm locked into it.
Mm.
And you can always change your mind.
Well, it goes back to our brains looking for that plan.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like developing some sort of way forward where, okay, if I do this, then like our brain just immediately tries to predict what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
And like once you make a choice, your brain kind of locks itself in.
Yeah.
It's that goddamn lizard brain.
I know, and it's not true, right?
Mhm.
We can always change our minds.
Mhm.
We can always make a new decision. There's
Mhm.
always forks in the road to choose other paths.
Mhm.
And if you tried something small, let's say,
Mhm.
and you didn't like it, don't do it again.
Yeah.
Do something else.
Or if you tried something crazy and big and you didn't like it, you got a really good story out of it.
Right? And try something
And try
smaller
something
next
else.
time. Yeah.
Like, it's, I don't,
It seems so simple, not easy. So
mhm.
I always like to say simple, not easy, because
Yeah.
it isn't easy. If it
Mhm.
was easy, we'd all just do it. Like,
Mhm.
there wouldn't be any reason to be having these discussions.
Yeah.
They seem big or overwhelming.
Mhm.
Simple, not easy. So just remember that. Like, I don't want to think that, I don't know. I just don't want to be seen as like overlooking someone's angst about something. Like, this is just the psychologist in me, right?
Yeah.
But no.
Well, and again, like the angst is your chance to either kind of like do the work on your own or work with a coach or work with a therapist. Like if maybe you come up with 10 things where like, oh, that's interesting, but then like the angst comes up for all of those things, maybe it's time to bring someone else in and be like, I'm feeling stuck. I'm not sure. Looking for a bit of a different perspective.
Diversification again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then having someone else kind of help guide you through that angst, because if there's
Mm-hmm.
so much there, if there's so much, maybe it's not angst, maybe it's something else, but if you're getting so much negative feedback,
From yourself.
then that's kind of your brain's way of saying like, we need someone to hold our hand,
Yeah,
like
or we need
we need
someone's
some
help.
support, we
Yeah.
need we need a little something more. We're
Mm-hmm.
fine, and we just need a little bit of help. It's no worse than like going and asking like a question of your boss or something like that. Like, I don't know. I think like even doing something like that is scary. And what's the risk versus reward?
Yeah. So again, it's like diversification of a
Mm-hmm.
perspective. So maybe it's not time to diversify your activities, but it's time to bring someone else in to say, I need help,
Yeah.
and to have them help you.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. So we're still on message.
Yeah. All right. I feel like it's a
Me
perfect like
too.
ending for this week's episode. Um, yeah. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, tirades,
You can find us.
yep,
Where
you can
can you
find
find
us.
us?
You can find us on the Instagrams at Sugar and Spikes Pod. And we may also have a website coming up, which is very exciting too.
Woohoo. Growth.
Because we're a real podcast now. There was something online where it was like, how old would can your business function without you? And like they put it in terms of age. And it made me think of when we talked about like your business is like your kid and blah, blah,
Oh,
blah.
yeah.
And I was thinking about it in terms of the podcast. And I was like, it's 1 year old. That means it can sleep through the night, and it's starting
Maybe.
to
It can maybe
it
sleep
can maybe
through the
sleep
night.
through the night, and it's starting to learn words and actually have a message. And I was like, and we're starting to learn words and actually have a message. We're
Yay!
we are developmentally appropriate.
That's right.
All right, guys, on that note, I'll talk to you later.
Bye, friends.